much for joining us here on Wing.
Hey, almost Friday. We'll see you tomorrow.
This is Wink Tracks the Tropics, powered by the Weather Authority.
When the tropics are active and timing is everything, the Weather Authority is keeping you prepared.
The latest update did come in from the National Hurricane Center. Helene moving north-northeast. Winds have increased up to 90 miles per hour.
Keeping you informed.
It's now 170 miles northwest of us, and as we had mentioned, this is a major Cat 4 hurricane. This is going to have major landfall implications.
Southwest Florida has seen its fair share of storms in the past few years.
We are leaving immediately after this because it is not safe. You're starting to see some of these debris, sticks flying up and out, and it's one of the reasons why Sanibel is evacuated. It clearly is not safe out here.
But our slice of paradise has bounced back in ways we'd never expected.
It's tough.
They had each other, and that's a good thing.
I wouldn't have made it without Marianne. We're going to make it. We're going to make it.
Wink News has been there with you every step of the way. That won't change.
Yes, we avoid the worst part of the storm, but the wind field's growing and the pressures are deepening. We're going to feel more of that influence on the back end with the surge.
From forecast cones to safety tips, the Weather Authority team has you covered. You're watching Wink Tracks the Tropics. All right. Welcome on in and happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's edition of Wink Tracks the Tropics. Yes, things are nice and quiet on our side of the tropics, and we love that. That doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about, though. Not only are we going to talk about what we're looking ahead towards, specifically towards the middle of this month and even towards the tail end of this month. We're always looking ahead, making sure that everyone is up to date on the latest information. And again, we like the trends so far. I'll talk about those, but also something that a lot of you guys have been asking us about, a little bit about, the Pacific side of things, right? Because when we talk about hurricane season, we always talk about the Atlantic Basin. Today we're going to touch on both of them, see what's going on that side of the world as well, and kind of how they kind of interplay when they have active seasons versus when we don't. So there's a lot of fun information today, including a little bit of a breakdown on our local Southwest Florida forecast, including that cold front on the way that I know everyone's been talking about. Luckily, I have an amazing panel joining me today. Let's pop them up. Good morning. How we doing? Meteorologists Oceana Hayden and Nikki Sheeks. How we doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Thursday. Friday's on the way tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Looking forward to that, right?
Pre-Friday.
There you go. We're all happy. Cool. So, a lot to get to today, so why don't we go ahead and dive right into it. What we're going to start with today, and keep in mind, this platform is interactive. If you have any questions or comments at any time, go ahead and drop them in the comment section if you are watching live on YouTube or Facebook, and let us know where you're watching from as well. We're going to start off with a little bit of a comparison here. The Atlantic versus the Eastern Pacific 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. Now, both of these basins are monitored by the National Hurricane Center, so we can do a really nice comparison of the statistics on each of them. When it comes to named storms so far this season, the Atlantic Basin has had 13 of them, while the East Pacific has had 20. So they've definitely seen more activity in terms of the amount of tropical systems. Hurricanes, we have had 5, and the East Pacific has seen 11 of those. So again, even a higher ratio of the storms that have developed in the East Pacific have become hurricanes versus that ratio of 5 to 13 in the Atlantic. Now, here, the next two statistics are definitely the interesting ones. Major hurricanes, 4 in the Atlantic Basin and 4 so far in the Eastern Pacific. So that is equal. So although they have seen almost more than double the amount of hurricanes, we have had the same amount of major hurricanes, which again are Category 3 and higher. So it's kind of been boom or bust in the Atlantic in terms of if we got a hurricane to develop, most of them went on to become major hurricanes, whereas in the East Pacific, most of them stayed below that Category 3 threshold. Now, the next statistic is also going to be very interesting. This is called ACE, Accumulated Cyclone Energy. So we know that these hurricanes and tropical storms, they are energy producers. I mean, giant amounts of energies are released by these systems. So they have a way of actually measuring how much energy is accumulated throughout the season. Look at this. There has been a higher number of ACE in the Atlantic Basin rather than the Eastern Pacific Basin, even though the Eastern Pacific has seen nearly double the amount of named storms and over double the amount of hurricanes. I want to bring in my panel real quick just so we can kind of dissect that. I mean, what do you think about that? Can you guys kind of explain why there's been a higher ACE in the Atlantic versus the Eastern Pacific?
Well, I mean, first off, I'd like to see how much Melissa contributed to that. But like you were talking about, those storms that did develop in the Atlantic Basin, they were all pretty powerful. The only hurricane that wasn't a major hurricane was Imelda, a Cat 2, and then we had Cat 4s and Cat 5s. And so those are big producers of ACE, and I think that's a big contributor of that. But we can see that the Eastern Pacific did produce a couple of major hurricanes, but I think maybe it wasn't on the level on what we saw in the Atlantic Basin.
Yeah, exactly what Nikki said. She really hit it out of the park there. But pretty much the major hurricanes that we have had, like Aaron, we saw rapid intensification with Aaron, with all of our major hurricanes, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, almost all of them were rapidly intensified, so they accumulated a lot of that energy. And so I'm really not surprised to see that the Atlantic has accumulated more, even though the Pacific did have more storms, just because of the intensity, just to like knock that on. The intensity really has to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, the Eastern Pacific side of things is typically around Central America, Mexico as well. You can even think of the southwestern coast of the United States up until around Hawaii. Then, if you keep going away, that turns into the Western Pacific. And on that side of things right now, they're dealing with not one, but 2 different typhoons. Now remember, once you get into the Western Pacific, it is a hurricane, but it's called a typhoon. Same exact thing, same exact categorizations as well. So this is Typhoon Feng Wang. All right, it was a tropical storm. I believe it has now been upgraded, or it is just about to be upgraded. It's a strengthening system. You can see Guam there. You can also see Micronesia on the right side of your screen. This will be approaching the Philippines over the next few days. And in the Western Pacific, this is what their forecast cones look like. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to share that. In terms of the numbers, kind of breaking down what they mean, you notice there is a little black line pointing to each center point of the forecast, and the numbers there, the 06 in the 07 and 08 represent November 6th, 7th, and 8th, and the 9th, and then the number with the Z is actually the time. That's Zulu time. It's kind of like a universal time standard, and then it shows you the wind speed. So you can see all the way on the right side of your screen, as of the 6Z update, 40-knot winds. As you move forward in time before it makes landfall, look at that. November 9th, I believe that is, at 6Z Zulu time forecast to have wind speeds of 115 knots. That's going to make it a very strong system. So yes, it goes to show that while it can be quiet in the Atlantic, there is still a whole other side of this world that is still dealing with a hurricane or typhoon season themselves, and that's unfortunately what's happening in their neck of the woods. But I just wanted to show that. I thought it was kind of an interesting thing because I know we don't normally talk a little bit about that Pacific side. I was looking through some of our questions and comments coming in. Casper, good morning, team. Good morning to you as well. Lisa wanted to chime in. Good morning, my favorite team. Thank you so much for that. And Casper also wanted me to share that comparison graphic on Facebook afterwards. Yes, absolutely, I'll do that for you. All right, that's enough about the Pacific side of things. Now let's talk a little bit about the Atlantic side, where things are much more on the quiet side. We love to say that, right? No development expected over the next 7 days. Absolutely nothing going on out there across the Gulf, Atlantic, or the Caribbean. And yes, that extended outlook that's given to us by the Climate Prediction Center agrees that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, there's likely not going to be any activity at all out there. In fact, they're not even highlighting a low chance of development anywhere. So that's also some very welcoming news. I've shown this to you the past few days, right? This is the tropical frequency map showing you where is it most likely that we will see a tropical system develop if one were to develop. For the month of November, that is typically in the Western Caribbean as well as the Southwestern Atlantic. And the fact that you see a yellow color there and not an orange or a red indicates that that chance of development is even lower. Now, we've been talking the past few days, we're watching the Southwestern Caribbean because some of the models have been hinting at the chance for some development, but it has been a very weak signal from a lot of the models. This is the European model, and not only just one run of the European model, it is all of the ensemble members. So think of these as a bunch of individual models within the European model that all have different little biases and different initial starting points and also different initial, kind of samplings of the atmosphere. So they're all a little bit different. And you can see there's only maybe 3 of these probably dozens of models that actually indicate any sort of development whatsoever in the Southwestern Caribbean. In fact, as of today's update, you can see a few more of them actually favor that development in the Eastern Pacific side. So that's kind of interesting to note there. And again, this takes us out all the way until around November 16th, so 10 days from now. That's the European ensemble members. This next graphic I'm going to show you is the GFS, the American ensemble members. And you can see a few more of those think that there's a better chance for at least some sort of very weak low to develop in the Southwestern Caribbean. But again, it's not a lot of the members, and we all know that the GFS is notorious for being a little bit too bold sometimes. So not only is the European model not really on board with this, the AI models, those new ones, the Google AI model is also not very on board with that either. So the trends have continued to be our friends. And again, here's the thing, whether something wanted to develop down there or not, it can't come up here. Let me show you why that is. This is our tropical moisture tracker. You'll kind of get an idea of where that moisture is kind of moving in across the Caribbean. I kind of circled it for you down there. And you can see where a little bit of broad rotation tries to get going near Central America. That is well to our south. And if you look just to the north there, that's right. That is pretty much a fortified blockade in way of a massive cold front that will be protecting the southeastern United States and the Gulf from any sort of potential tropical development. And the chances of any development at this time, again, look fairly low. So I say all this because there are a lot of things working in our favor here and working in the Caribbean's favor as well. We know they need a break after dealing with Melissa and even the countries that weren't directly impacted. It's just not fun to see a major Category 5 hurricane, in your waters. It really heightens the nerves. So the fact that the signals for any sort of development are fairly weak at this time is a very good thing. And the fact that the Climate Prediction Center hasn't even warranted enough for a low chance of development is also a very good thing. And in just in case you were wondering, again, so far this season we've had 13 named storms in the Atlantic, 5 of which have become hurricanes, and 4 of those have become major hurricanes. The last name on the list was Melissa. The next name up, if we even get to that name, which again, it's a big if at this point, is going to be Nestor. So I want to bring back in my panel. Again, things are quiet. We love that. That means we don't have to spend too much time talking about it. Just want to give you guys an opportunity to kind of share your thoughts in case I missed anything.
Yeah, I like everything that you said. I know it is pretty interesting to see the GFS pulling all of that out. Just like I said yesterday, we kind of all agreed on this. Because the Euro and the Google AI are not on board with it, it's hard to think that the GFS is going to be correct because we always look for consistency. We also look for agreement, and the fact that the GFS really doesn't have a ton of agreement with any other model. That's why I think the the Climate Prediction Center is saying, they kind of took off what they thought last Tuesday. They had kind of said maybe there was something from November 6th to the 12th, or no, November 10th to the 12th, but now they took it away, and I like to see that gone. You know, it's nice to see that we maybe could be ending hurricane season quiet. I'll take that.
Well, one thing I do want to point out, I know I'm going a little bit off topic because you said we were done with the Eastern Pacific, but could you go back to that cone? Because
absolutely.
I think that cone is very interesting.
Yes.
And the reasoning is, going to go back a little bit, after Hurricane Ian, our chief meteorologist, Matt Devitt, decided to remove that center line of the cone that we see here in the Atlantic Basin because he found it very misleading. People thought that's where the center of the storm was going. So anytime I do any hurricane talks or just talk to people in general about tropical systems and the cone, I always emphasize that the cone is where the storm could go. The center could be on the far western periphery or it could be on the far eastern. So those impacts extend way out of where that cone is, because sometimes those tropical storm force winds could go 200, 300 miles from the center. And I think this is very interesting that the cone is encompassing what the size of the storm is expected to be and kind of even going around that to really showcase that those impacts could be far from the center. So I think that's a really interesting cone, and maybe something that we should think about implementing on our side of the basin, just to give people a better idea of how large and how far-reaching these impacts are with hurricanes and tropical storms.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, with Milton, if everybody just looked at a center line, you would have never thought that us here in Southwest Florida would have felt any effects from that. But we had the surge, we had all of those impacts from the sweeping motion, from that counterclockwise spin. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. That is a pretty cool cone, and it looks really wide, but I think for good reason.
You know, an interesting part of this as well that I've kind of thought to myself, I certainly haven't answered it, but you know, if you notice that center cone, I mean that center little circle you put there, it's purple, right? I expect that to be kind of the worst of the winds there, but you notice how it changes shape along the way? As it gets to its strongest point there on November 9th, pretty much right before landfall, you notice that wind field is the largest, which would make sense, right? It's getting a little bit stronger out there, and you notice that it's kind of favored more so on the right side of the storm, which is the dirty side, and yes, you do experience a little bit bigger of a wind field on that side of the storm, and then notice after it makes landfall, that kind of wind field that they create near the center really shifts. They kind of shift it more towards the southern and the western side, and that northeastern side kind of gets sheared off. So I mean, you guys can add on to this, but it feels like they put a lot of work into making this forecast track, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you were saying, it looks like they're trying to show how far out those hurricane force winds would be going. And like you said, of course, stronger on the right side, just because that being the dirty side of the storm. So I think, again, I think it's just a really interesting cone.
Yeah. Shout out to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center.
Yeah.
I believe that is who collaborates on this.
Take some notes.
Now, Nikki, we have a question for you coming in from the chat. This is coming from Tim Kraut. He says, good Thursday morning, everyone. He's also asking, is the Pacific normally more active than the Atlantic?
I think that's interesting. I would have to go back and look at the climatology, but it seems like in the Eastern Pacific, at least, when you look at the storm, the typical storm range through, you know, as we look at hours in the Atlantic Basin, it peaks in September and then it significantly drops off. But if you were to look at the one for the Eastern Pacific, it has a lot of peaks and valleys in it. So it's really interesting how they stay fairly active for, I think, a longer period of time, and that could lead to more tropical activity, I think, throughout the season.
Yeah, I think the Pacific side starts early May, so they might actually add an extra month to their season, so that would make exactly sense.
Yeah, we saw it definitely active this year. I feel like at one point it was just kind of like a parade of storms that was forming in the Eastern Pacific,
Very
just
early
on the other side of Central America from us. And then you have to think about the Eastern Pacific is even much different than the Western Pacific, right? The dynamics in the Western Pacific allow some of these storms to get a lot stronger compared to what they can in the Atlantic. There's kind of a limit in terms of physics of how strong these storms can get, and it seems that in the Western Pacific, that limit is a little bit higher. We've seen some of the strongest storms on Earth over on that side, right?
I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I think that they're able to sit over water for a longer period of time, and that would allow for it to intensify and obviously become stronger storms than what we see here in the Atlantic Basin, because those storms only have so long before they run into the Caribbean or the United States.
Yeah, that's very true. We've said it before, where if the storm forms in the Caribbean, it kind of can't make its way out of the Caribbean without making impacts to land, which therefore also has an effect on that storm as well. So I think that I would also agree with you, Nikki. That's probably why.
Yeah, and speaking of the Western Pacific, again, that storm that we are watching, Feng Wang right there, that'll be the one to track, the one that we were referencing that forecast cone with as it makes its way further west. All right, time now for weather in 60 seconds, and I bet we're going to take a little bit longer than 60 seconds on this one. Nikki's got a really cool topic for us today. I will let you take it away.
Well, something you hear about often during the hurricane season, we talk about eye wall replacements, and that typically happens with these stronger hurricanes. Now, it will momentarily weaken the storm system, so you will see it maybe sometimes back off to, let's say it goes from a Cat 3 to a Cat 2 or a Cat 1, but then usually when it does re-strengthen, it is stronger than that initial standing. Now, what happens is you have this inner eye wall, and it's very tight. Sometimes it becomes unstable. There's a lot of turbulence within it, and that causes some disorganization. So there are rings around that inner eye wall that tries to organize, and it begins to move towards the center. And when it does so, it takes away the energy, the moisture from that inner eye wall, and it replaces it, and it becomes the new eye wall. So this is a cycle that we can see happen. Again, it typically is with those stronger systems that this does take place. And I think it's such an interesting thing to see happen, because you will see that eye wall so distinctly, that eye so clear, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and then it's back again. But it is just re-strengthening through this time frame. And I'm gonna go a little off topic on there, but I remember when I was in college, one of my professors was actually helping to study this and to understand that this was actually taking place, because if you talk a lot about meteorology or you listen to us often, this is a science that's always continuing to grow. We're learning new things every day. The technology is getting better and better. So we're still learning a lot when it comes to our tropical systems, even just our everyday weather, tornadoes, you know, your everyday thunderstorms. So I just always found this so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, important to point out that the eye wall replacement cycle is always different based on what storm it is, right? It's never the same, and I think that's why the science is just going to continue to get better and better, and that's why there's so much to study, because I can think of two comparisons off the top of my head, and I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Look at Melissa. That one, I mean, it was hard to tell if it underwent an eye wall replacement cycle. If it did, it certainly wasn't a typical one, right? Because especially before landfall, I mean, typically these things get strong enough, kind of like what Milton did. It got so strong, and then it had to undergo an eye wall replacement cycle, and it fell apart, and it actually re-strengthened again. Melissa, on the other hand, before it made landfall in Jamaica, I mean, we were thinking it was going to go through an actual eye wall replacement cycle, but it really never did. It just kept getting stronger and stronger. Now, think of another storm, Idalia. That's the one that comes to mind for me. It made landfall up in Florida's Big Bend in 2023. That one actually underwent an eye wall replacement cycle at the perfect time. It underwent that right as it was making landfall. So it actually helped to kind of disorganize the storm briefly and slightly likely weaken it as well, versus if that thing had just kept strengthening, or if it had underwent that eye wall replacement cycle while it was still in the Gulf before making landfall, it would have been a lot worse. So I'm really glad you brought this up. I think it's just a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I remember thinking that we all thought that Melissa was going to do it right before making landfall in Jamaica, which would have been good news, because it would have helped do that dismembering like kind of Idalia kind of did, but it didn't, and it made landfall strong. So it's really interesting, these eye wall replacement cycles. I remember watching Milton's, and it was just kind of textbook. It was awe. I was in awe.
Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you, Nikki, for bringing that up. We'll move along now. We're going to get a little bit more local with it. It's time now for our Wink Weather Watcher Spotlight. I get to take this one today. This was sent to us this morning. Just a beautiful view of the sunrise. Check this out. Dot Dunbar sent this in early this morning as the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon. This is overlooking the skies of East Naples. I mean, look at that. A fiery sunrise is what we like to call it.
Beautiful.
And the reason why? A lot of cloud cover out there today across southwest Florida, and that's actually going to be changing as we look ahead towards early next week. And folks, I'll tell you why. The big show is headed our way, that real-time cold front, and that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today. Now, before we do, when we talk about cold, especially in southwest Florida, though it may not be the cold standards for other folks, we get chilly down here a little bit faster, right? So when it gets chilly, a lot of folks kind of tend to turn on that heater. Sometimes it's been a long time, and it can be a little bit dangerous at times, especially the first time you turn it on. You kind of get that smell, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I even get confused as well. Good thing Oceana's here. She's going to talk a little bit to you about turning on that heater for the first time.
Yeah, I feel like this cold front, I want to say that even non-Floridians would say that it's bringing cold air to us. I think that being in the upper 40s technically is cold for most people. So I'm going to say that it's not just a Floridian cold front for this one. So when you are turning on the heater for the first time, a lot of you may notice you have that really bad smell. I hate that smell. You could always turn on the heater for a minute or two, like today or tomorrow, to kind of get that bad smell off. What that is it's burning the dust off of that heat coil. So actually the best thing you can do is go to your furnace, make sure that there's no debris anywhere near it, no leaves have collected or any dust. Kind of do that before you turn it on. And then sometimes your smoke alarm will go off, which is not the best case scenario, but if it does, just go ahead, check it out, make sure there is no fire, but it is kind of going to smell a little burny. Most of us know that, but it goes away very fast. That's the good news. So you're just going to want to open the windows in the meantime. Like, it's going to be a little chilly on Tuesday, even for me to maybe open my windows. I think that instead of turning on my heater, which also you have to keep in mind that does affect your electricity bill quite a bit, just put on the fuzzy socks, light a bunch of candles throughout your house. I like to cozy up in a blanket, but if you do turn on your heater, make sure to be safe about it. Make sure that that smell goes away. If it doesn't go away, then there's likely a bigger issue.
It's funny when you bring that up, different things, tactics to kind of battle the cold. Another thing that comes to mind that, we've talked about it a lot the past few years, I feel like more than we did before, so more people are learning about it, but there's always some people that still don't know. You can change the direction on your ceiling fan.
Yes, yes.
So, it normally spins in a way that pushes the air downwards, so that helps to cool you off, but there is a little switch on most of the fans if you can reach it. You switch it, and then the fan spins the other way. It actually takes that colder air that settles down near your floor, and it brings it up, and the hot air that rises because it's less dense than cold air, that actually gets circulated back down to the floor where you are, so it does make it a little bit warmer.
Yeah, that is so neat. I also learned that the fan doesn't technically cool down your room, it cools down your body temperature. So I don't know how much I believe that, but apparently it's factual, because I love to leave my fan on in my room and close the door and then come back to it in like an hour or two because I feel like it makes it fresher in there. But apparently it works much better on just your body, so you maybe don't want to waste electricity on it if it's been
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's not going to actually cool it down, but it's like if you put a fan in front of you, you feel a little better out there.
I know, exactly.
Air's blowing on you.
I know, I've never actually switched my fan direction. Have either of you?
Really? Oh, I do it all the time.
Are you serious?
Well, I mean, I was living in North Florida for a while, so, it gets a little colder up there.
I never knew that.
And at nighttime, you still need that fan on, right? It doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees or 2. I feel like you still need that fan on. So I would always change the direction. And that's exactly what I'm going to do on Tuesday, instead of turning on the heat.
That's smart thinking. I just found out about that like a week ago.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll give it a try. I'll report back.
Good. We'll look forward to hearing your report next week. All right. We talked all about this cold. Why don't I go ahead and pop up that 10-day forecast for you so we can actually talk about what's going to be happening over the next several days. So for this weekend, it's going to be a little bit more on the warm side, actually unseasonably warm with highs well into the mid-80s. A couple spots will actually make a run into the upper 80s. And you notice that rain chance, 30% coverage. Yes, some isolated showers are possible. We have enough moisture to work with in our atmosphere this weekend. Even today and tomorrow, a few showers are possible. But notice on Monday, things start to change. That's when that cold front is going to sweep through. Throughout the day on Monday, you'll start to notice less cloud cover out there. It is also going to be quite breezy because all of that cold, dry air is more dense than the air that is in place right now. So as it rushes in, it really moves that air around, and then you get wind. Voila. Look at the temperature difference. You wake up Monday morning in the mid to upper 60s. 20 degrees colder when you wake up Tuesday morning. How about that? We're looking at widespread 40s now across Southwest Florida early Tuesday morning and even Tuesday afternoon. A lot of our high temperatures will likely stay just below 70 degrees. How about that? And then the back half of the week looks really nice out there. It's going to be cool in the mornings with lows in the 50s. The afternoons will still be a little bit nice and warm, right? It'll feel good out there after that chilly start to the day as those highs make their way into the upper 70s to low 80s. Ladies, how are we feeling about this?
I'm ready for it.
Yeah?
I'm welcoming it.
And for all those folks that are going to be out for Veterans Day, I know a lot of people do memorials or parades. Bundle up. It's going to be chilly.
Yeah, definitely. And Nikki talked about the wind chill yesterday. I mean,
Right.
if we have a breeze, it's going to feel even colder out there. Might want to cover your plants, stuff like that.
Yeah, especially early Tuesday morning, I think we could have a little bit of that wind chill factor, which is going to make those temperatures probably feel maybe 5 degrees colder than what they actually are. We'll have to see definitely a little bit of time before we get there. Lots of fine tuning as well. And honestly, the trend with those morning lows have actually been going down the past few days. If you've noticed, earlier this week we were forecasting a low of 50, then we were in the upper 40s. You know, we're kind of making our way closer to the mid 40s now. And you think about some of our inland and northern communities, yeah, it'll be quite cold out there for sure. Tomorrow, make sure you guys tune back in, same time, same place. We're going to talk a little bit more about, you know, what we're expecting tropics-wise over the next few weeks, and of course, another good coverage of exactly what we're expecting with that cold front headed our way. But hey, Oceana, Nikki, thank you guys so much for taking the time to stick with us today and chit-chat about the weather. We always love it. Make sure you guys tune back in tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Wink Tracks the Tropics. For now, have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you back here on Friday.